There are two completely separate worlds, both falling under the PvE umbrella. How's it going, YouTube? My name is LBNinja7, your favorite WoW healing YouTuber. And guys, today we're going to be looking at the healer imbalance issue in WoW. Not just the Holy Paladin imbalance, that's not what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be discussing another imbalance issue that is very glaring, very obvious, and I'm going to show a visual representation of that issue today, and then we're going to talk about how we can fix that issue, how the developers could listen to us, listen to our feedback, and fix the issue. Now, it would be a pretty drastic change in terms of how they balance and do things, how they run things, but it's something that they haven't not done before, and something that could just fix the issue. It could actually solve a big issue in the imbalance between the healer classes or within the healer classes. So we're going to take a look at the data from weeks 1 through 4, and then we're going to look at the week 5 and look specifically at the priest specs. So let's take a look. This is before Discipline Priest got that minor adjustment. These are raid numbers, by the way, in Mythic rating. Notice how the lowest of low Discipline Priests were down here at the 40 level, and the lowest of low Mistweaver Monks were around the 50 level. This is just the lowest performing. This is the bottom end, the outliers kind of, or I guess not technically the outliers. These would be the outliers, but basically the lowest that you could score with your healing as each class. So Discipline Priest here, clearly at the bottom. Its highs weren't even up here, basically in line with Holy Priest at the bottom of the highs of the high, but then the lows were just very, very low. So then let's take a look after this 4% adjustment to atonement, just 4% more atonement healing from their damage, and let's take a look at how that affected it. And boom, they are up here now in the second spot. Their lows have been brought up all the way basically in line with Mistweavers. I mean, it's a little bit less, but brought up so much, so the people that are performing the worst on the spec are going to feel a lot better and feel like they can actually do things. Even if they don't execute the rotation, get the cooldowns right, do everything perfectly, they're still going to feel like these other healers feel in that same scenario. However, their highs are up here competing with Resto Druid and Mistweaver Monks. Like, the top of the top end Discipline Priests can still perform at the top level. So that was an amazing change, although just being a slight tweak to one of their numbers. Now, the thing about Atonement is that it gets a lot more value in Raid than it does in Mythic Plus. Yes, it is still vital to their rotation. Like, they have to focus on their Atonement healing in Mythic Plus. I'm not saying it's not important in Mythic Plus. However, it just gets more value in Raid because it's healing up to 20 people at a time versus 5, whereas there aren't that many other specs that do that. So this change was focused more to bring them more in line with the rest of the healers in Raid, while not affecting too much their Mythic Plus values and levels, and move them too high on the tier list in one form of content. It was basically to tweak one form of content for them, and it was a great very well done by Blizzard, finding that number that they could tweak that would improve their raid healing while not completely just blowing them up in Mythic Plus like they kind of did with Paladin. Now, the problem with this is that it's kind of hard to do that on every healer spec. Not every healer spec has big focuses in Raid that they don't focus on in Mythic Plus. Now, obviously, most of my viewers are Mistweaver Monks. We basically play two completely different specs when we go from Mythic Plus to Raid, but not every class has those things that Blizzard could find and tweak one number to adjust one form of content and not affect the other as much. Now, keeping in mind priests, we're going to take a look at the Mythic Plus. So this is the Mythic Plus tier list, basically from subcreation.net, and then we're going to pull that over here so that we can look at it. So we can look at it side by side with the rating tier list. So here, this is the Mythic Plus on all affixes, so just the aggregate data on Mythic Plus healing, and then this is the aggregate data on the raid healing. So how they pull this data, it's a little bit complicated, and I'll try to read into it and kind of think back to my college days, but I think it works is they look at the top 500 runs, or 500 parses, I guess, for Mythic rating, and they take the 95th confidence interval, so basically the bottom 5% of that top 500 runs, and see where that lands. So the data is a little skewed toward the top end, and it still does look like it's taking a little bit of time to update for Discipline Priests, But I do think that this number, why Discipline Priest is still seen here on the raid tier list, is from this number. Now, this is the number of players that play each spec. You see here, it is still the lowest, 1,500, versus Holy Priest's 15,000. But if you look at weeks 1 through 4, there were only 867 parses in total. So that number will grow, and I do believe that that will affect the tier list. However, this is just the current data and how it looks. Now, let's look at Discipline Priest. In Mythic Plus, it is performing fine. Obviously, it's that battle healer playstyle where they do good damage. They have a lot of great utility that transitions, or that transfers very well in Mythic Plus, like having a tank DR, having bubble for incoming big booms of damage, having low cooldowns with their Shadow Covenant, and just being able to cycle their Holy Word Radiance and get some good damage out to heal the group pretty often. So they do have great utility for Mythic Plus. However, that utility doesn't quite transfer as much as Holy Priests does in raiding. Now, vice versa, in raiding, Symbol of Hope resetting 20 people's defensive cooldown is so much more valuable than resetting 5 people's cooldown. And obviously that's in the best case scenario where you actually do reset everyone's cooldown, but it still shows that the utility that Holy Priests bring is just much more valuable in raid. Also resetting, giving mana back to all of your healers is great. Just imagine how upset your DPS would get if your Holy Priest in your raid said that they were swapping to like Resto Druid or something. Your Unholy Death Knight would just go up in flames. Where's my PI? Don't swap, please, I'll pay you. What's your Venmo? Holy Priest utility is just so valuable in raids, whereas in Mythic Plus, that utility doesn't really get them as far, and then they're kind of just left with their throughput. Their constant throughput is very good. They do have some powerful cooldowns. Salve is on like a 12-minute cooldown, but you can bring it down to a much lower cooldown. However, in Mythic Plus, they just don't have that oomph. They don't have that great cycle of abilities like we've talked about with Paladin. They just lack something in Mythic Plus. There's clearly a balancing issue between the two forms of PvE content, Mythic Plus and raiding, and how can we fix that? Well, let's look at Resto Druids. So Resto Druids are in the A tier on raid healing. They do so much healing, up there with Mistweaver Monk. However, it's in Mythic Plus, it's over here in B tier, which normally on another season would be the A tier, and the Holy Paladin would be the only S tier, but in this season there's just that big gap. So Resto Druid is fine to play in Mythic Plus. It's not great, it's not overperforming. Obviously, it's not even cracking its way into God Comp, but it can do the job. However, it does struggle a bit, or else you would see it a lot more. But in raid, it is kind of outperforming in the throughput and the HPS. It can ramp almost as high as Mistweaver Monks, but then do that constant throughput up there with your Holy Priests. And that is shown when we look at this graph. I mean, we can look at the weeks 1 through 4. They were up near the top up here with Holy Paladin before the rework. And then on weeks 5, on week 5 after the rework, or after the little nerfing session that they got, they're still up here. Just, I mean, they are performing so well. You could argue Mistweaver Monk is right there, but a little bit less. There's a little bit of a chunk right here on that mid data that shows that Resto Druid is just outperforming the other healers in terms of raid. So what does Blizzard do? Well, if you have not seen, they are actually nerfing Resto Druids come 10.1.7. They're nerfing all of their healing by 6%. So this will kind of bring them back. Where was it? This will kind of bring them back in line with Mistweaver Monks. Now, Mistweaver Monks still will have this this very high peak healing that they can do. But if you know anything about Mistweaver Monks, look, there are only 3,000 Mistweaver Monks still parsing currently, and those of us left are people that have been playing the spec very long. There are very few new people coming into the spec to bring these numbers down. So it's a lot harder to find data on Mistweaver Monks than it is on Resto Druids, who have currently almost triple the amount of parses. So yes, this will bring them back more in line. It will scale them down in rating. But where does that leave them in Mythic Plus when it's already hard for any non-Holy Paladin spec to get into Mythic Plus content, to get up and push those 28s, 27s, even 25s? It's hard for Resto Druids to even get thought about, brought into a group when we live in Holy Paladin's world in Mythic Plus. And then also look at Holy Paladin. Yes, they were performing pretty well in Mythic Plus, or in Raid, they were at the top, which it's fine. There's always going to be a spec at the top, but the heavy-handed nerfs to bring them back more in line in Mythic Plus kind of shot them down a bit in Raid. It was a little too heavy-handed. Look, the highest of high Holy Paladin is now performing worse than Resto Shaman. We haven't talked about Resto Shaman since Shadowlands, it feels like. So these heavy-handed Mythic Plus nerfs have really affected their raiding performance. And then these nerfs to Resto Druid for raiding is going to affect even further their Mythic Plus performance. And it's just going to be even if it's just 6% healing. I mean, if you've watched any plus 28s, plus 27 Halls of Infusion keys, you can see that 6% healing is needed. I mean, especially in the bursty world that we live in, every little bit of healing in Mythic Plus is necessary. So this will just hurt their Mythic Plus chances even further. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is actually right in front of us. It's right here. So they have been balancing for quite some time now. They've been balancing the game on PvP and on PvE. Completely separate tuning. They noticed that Resto Druids were also healing a bit too much, but not way too much in PvP. So they adjusted the numbers in all PvE content by 6% and all PvP content by 4%. And they've been doing this. If you've been paying attention to patch notes, Ancient Teachings is a great example from my fellow Mistweaver monks. It does less healing in PvP than it does in all the PvE content. They have adjusted that spell. It is a completely different spell in PvP than it is in PvE. Well, when we see two completely different PvE worlds between raiding and Mythic Plus, most classes like Holy Priest, Discipline Priest, you do not push keys as Holy Priest. You push keys as Discipline Priest, and then push raiding as Holy Priest, as seen in the numbers here. I mean, just look at these Disc Priest numbers versus the Holy Priest numbers. It's just, that is just what you do. There are two completely separate worlds, both falling under the PvE umbrella. So what do? I really truly think the game could benefit from doing this, making changes for raid tuning and making changes for PvP tuning and Mythic Plus tuning, separating it into 3 categories of tuning as opposed to just the 2, because there are 3 completely differently tuned pieces of category. Why are we not tuning our healers and everyone else to do the same thing, even if it's just for healers? I mean, we see the balance in DPS is always different and always changing. The graphs are always looking different, but for healing, it's just it goes too long being stale, being the same class at the top at a time. They need to do this change so that you can change it up more often. You can find those right numbers without completely ruining a class in one form of content easier. And let's just look at Mistweaver monks. I have to bring up my brothers in Mistweaver. We have our Mythic Plus build, which is solely fist weaving. We use Ancient Teachings, do the punches and kicks. You guys probably know what Ancient Teachings does. Every time that we do our kicks or our Tiger Palms, it heals someone near us. We do Feline Stomp, which summons the Stomp, and then whenever we Spinning Crane Kick, which is our other melee attacking ability, it does AoE healing to everyone around us. Basically, we play around Chi-Ji, which is just the Celestial that we summon that makes us punch and kick and get benefits that way. We are true fist weavers. Then you come to our raiding build. You still have to be in melee because you do find a lot of benefit, or most of your benefit in the build, from Rising Sun Kicking. However, you cast more spells than almost any. You feel like a Resto Druid. You press Vivify. I'm not saying it's quite the same number as the amount of rejuves that they have to press, but we press Vivify so often so that we can actually get those high numbers. So we have to bring 2 completely separate playstyles to get the content done. And if you try to take fist weaving into Mythic raiding, you're memeing. It will not put up the numbers. You will land here if you try that. If you bring the Yulon casting Vivify build to Mythic Plus, you'll do 0 damage and be memed, kicked out of the group in Mythic Plus, because these are 2 completely separate healers. You have your fist weavers in Mythic Plus, you have your mist weavers in raiding. It's 2 completely different playstyles, 2 completely different balances, and the balancing is just totally off. Now, the idea behind this was there. It was that you want to have variation in your talent trees. Yes, Sure, you want to have options. You want to give at least the illusion of having options. I want to be able to think, maybe I could take Phaeline into raid and play Ancient Teachings if I wanted to, but when you look at the numbers, look at the reality, it's just not possible. So what could they do? They could start balancing these buttons, these abilities, to work differently in Mythic Plus than they do in raid. In Mythic Plus, the Ancient Teachings number is honestly fine. The 135% of your damage is converted to healing is fine. It gets the job done, or else they wouldn't be playing it, although it kind of is just the best option. However, in raid, it just is a meme. It does not nearly as much healing as its Clouded Focus counterpart. So what could they do? They could tweak that number for raid. Make it do 150% of the damage like it used to in raiding. They could make Chi-Ji apply its Chi Cocoon to 10 people in raid as opposed to 5. That way people could maybe consider taking it into raid, although that would also just be a meme because Yu'lon pumps so much right now. When we look at Holy Priest, the spec that no one even plays in Mythic Plus right now, what could they do? Well, they could make Holy Word Serenity, I don't know, hit 2 people in Mythic Plus. Instead of hitting the single target, you apply it to one person. It works kind of like Shaylun's gift. It'll hit that one person, then pick a random other person that needs healing. That way they can combat the healing requirements of Mythic Plus a little bit more. Or their Light Weaver, if it didn't do 15% bonus healing, if your heal didn't do 15% bonus healing, it did, I don't know, 20%, 25% more in Mythic Plus instead of that same number in Raid and Mythic Plus, then who knows, we might see a world where you would play, where the Holy Priest mains could play Raid and Mythic Plus and be happy. Now, the good thing for priests is that they at least have that option. If I was a Holy Priest main, I would raid as Holy Priest, and then I could still log into that same character. Although I'd have to play Discipline, I could still play Discipline in Mythic Plus and be happy. I could it would get the job done, but you just couldn't do both. But at least they have that option. For all the other healer specs, it's either you enjoy your spec as healing in all forms of content, or you swap to like Windwalker Monk. If I was not enjoying the current playstyle or just thought that it was too difficult to complete content in Mythic Plus, as Mistweaver, I would just swap Windwalker. It's unfortunate, but that's the case. So us healers are having to kind of give up our identities, what we want to do, to be able to actually get things done. So would this change truly fix things? It would not fix the balance between the healers. There would still always be a healer at the top. However, when you nerf that healer from the top, they won't fall to the bottom or toward the middle and other forms of content as well. You could nerf them from the top of rating to put everything in line. You could get everything balanced in rating while also have everything balanced in Mythic Plus. And I think that we as players would benefit a lot more from this. So are there other changes that you guys want to see that could help tweak these numbers to bring some classes that are underperforming in some forms of content back more in line with the meta classes? Let me know down below, because I thought it was pretty fun looking at talents and thinking, what talents could change to bring Mistweavers back in Mythic Plus, or bring Holy Priest back in Mythic Plus? Obviously, bringing Discipline back in rating was their atonement level, but maybe that number could be looked at even further. This just opens up a world of tuning that would just make things better. I think when you add another variable in this case, it would just make things better. Guys, that's gonna do it for this video. That's just my take on how they could take a look at this glaring issue between Mythic Plus and rating. If you guys agree with me, make sure and like the video and let me know down below. Include your other thoughts, any other opinions that you guys might have, and engage with each other. In my last video, there was a lot of great discussion down in the comments below, so let's keep that going. Hopefully the developers will see this and see your ideas and try to make some changes. They might actually listen to us. But until next time, that's gonna do it for this video. I appreciate you guys watching my content. I'd appreciate it also if you hit the subscribe button. It is a free button. It just takes one click, but it helps me out a ton, helps me live my dream of being a content creator, or at least I'm getting close to being able to do that. So I'd appreciate if you click that button, and that way you'll be able to see more from me in the future. But that's gonna do it for this video. I really appreciate you guys for all the support lately. Hopefully they listen to us and make this change, because I do think it could help us out a ton. That's gonna do it for this video. Until next time, take care.